Hello, everyone. This is Jared with Financially Abundant Life, and this is my first podcast. And I'm really excited to share with you guys the things that I've learned about money, both from my professional experience, having worked in a bank for 20 years, and in my professional life, things that I've just learned from dealing with my own expenses. And I would like to start out by telling you a story from my personal life that I've thought about a lot and that has taught me a lot. So I'm currently, as I'm recording this, I'm currently 47 years old. But about when I first got out of school, I was about 25 years by the time I graduated from college. And I can remember after I worked in the bank for a couple of years, I decided that I was going to make a plan and get out of debt. And having worked at a bank, I was pretty good at spreadsheets. I took pride in them. My spreadsheets, they look great, let me tell you. They're awesome. So I decided I'm going to make this really cool looking spreadsheet, and I'm going to figure out how long it's going to take me to pay off my debt, and I'm going to get on a plan and I'm going to pay it all off. So I spent a couple of days doing this. I put a lot of time and effort into it, both into the functionality and of course into the looks, because I feel like a good looking spreadsheet is very important. I know that's weird to some of you, but that's that's important to me. So anyways, I made this budget and I put all the numbers in. I ran all these different scenarios. I calculated the rate of inflation and, pay raises and bonuses, and tried to incorporate everything I could to figure out, what is a realistic plan to pay off my debt here. And at the end of that, I realized that it was going to take me 20 years per this plan to pay off my debt. And I was never going to be able to save any money, and I was never going to be able to buy a home. Well, you can imagine how disappointing and frustrating, and I would even say depressing that was. And I went back and I looked at that thing over and over and over again and tried to figure out, how can I make this work? 20 years, no way. That just wasn't realistic. I mean, none of my friends were, I didn't want to live my life like that. And so you can imagine what I did with that. I just kind of set it aside and said, well, I'll just keep living my life, and somehow, some way, somewhere, the debt will get paid off. And it wasn't a really good plan, but that's all I could do at that point. And I fast forward, today it's about 22 years later. I am out of debt. I have no debt. I've bought a very nice house, and I am living a very good financial life. And over the course of those 22 years, I've learned a lot about money. In fact, I've learned that financial success really comes from success in two different areas. One I call the numbers side, and the other I call the mental side of money. And the numbers side is important, but the mental side is, I don't know how many times more, but vastly more important than the numbers side. So let me start by explaining the numbers side here. And in this podcast, or this, if you're watching this on YouTube, in this video, we're going to keep this at a pretty high level. And then in the upcoming podcast, we're going to dive into a whole bunch of these elements in much greater depth. Okay, so the numbers side, that is kind of what most people think of when they think of money. They think of, income and expenses, debits and credits. They think of payment plans. They think of interest payments. They think of debt schedules. And then, of course, we've all heard that, we should probably be on a budget. And a budget has a very negative connotation. In fact, I don't even like the term that we should be living on a budget. In my mind, a budget should just help us organize our money so that we can understand the incomes and the expenses, the inflows and the outflows. But it's up to us. We make the decisions where we want to spend our money. A lot of times when we say budget, people think, oh, that just tells me all the things that I can't buy, all the things that I shouldn't be spending my money on. It's almost like this overbearing parent ruling over us. And nobody likes that. I don't like that. And that's not what I use my budget for. In fact, I don't say that we're living on a budget. I say that I am using a budget. And in that respect, I have the power, if you want to say that, or it's my control. I make the decisions where my money goes. And that's what a good budget does. It just organizes all of your income, organizes all of your expenses, and that helps you realize and allocate your money to those things that you want to do. I do a little photography as a hobby. It's just a little side gig. It doesn't make me a lot of money, but I really enjoy it. And I spend a decent amount of money on cameras and lights and crazy things that, most people aren't interested in. But that's something that's important to me. And I've allocated my other expenses so that I can be able to afford to do that. Now, I only have Netflix and the basic cable channel. I don't have Hulu. I don't have whatever, all those other things, the HBO now and, Disney's coming out, all these different streaming services and the high packages on the cable. That's just not important to me. I don't really value that type of entertainment. And so I have extra disposable income to spend on things that really are important for me. Now, if TV is your thing and you really get a lot of enjoyment out of it, all means, there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of budgeting. It's just figuring out, okay, what's important to me? Where do I want to spend my money? All right, let me ask you this question too in regards to the numbers. I find this a fascinating question. I've thought about this a lot. Sometimes people say, that they never have enough to buy whatever they want, okay? And maybe that's true, maybe that's not. We've all heard, and I won't go into it in this podcast, but society is so sales driven these days, and people are always selling us on what we need to buy to be heavy, whether it's a handbag or a sunscreen lotion, or it's all about you buy this and you're going to experience this huge amount of bliss, and of course that never really happens, right? But that's always the advertising gimmick there. But let me ask you this question, and think about this. If you could always be happy but never have money, would you take that lifestyle? When I first asked myself that question, I kind of found myself in a loop. I was like, well, yeah, but I need money to be happy. I was like, well, no, and we all say this, right? Money doesn't buy you happiness. And so I'd be like, okay, well, I'll always be happy, but I'm never going to have money. You're like, what? So just think about that a lot and really ask yourself if you believe that. Or would you buy into that lifestyle? That's maybe a better thing. If, the genie out of the bottle could say, Jared, I can promise you happiness, but that you're never going to have money. Would we take that? Would I take that? It's an interesting question. I just want you to think about that a little bit. And that sort of leads us into the mental side of money, okay? And to have a financially abundant life, we have to think about money in the correct way. I'm absolutely convinced of this. And most of us don't. It's just kind of ingrained in our culture and our society. I want to read you a quote by Henry David Thoreau. You've all heard it. We all studied it in high school, but it had a profound impact on me when I was in high school. So this is out of his book, Walden, or Life in the Woods. And it's right at the very beginning. You've all heard it, but I want to read it to you again. And think of this quote or this paragraph I'm going to read you here, this 2 or 3 sentences, in regards to money, okay? So it says, this is Henry David Thoreau, I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discovered that I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear. Nor did I wish to practice resignation unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. It's kind of that first line there that we probably all remember from high school. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately. I love that, to live deliberately. And then I love how he says, I wanted to live and suck out all the marrow of life. Isn't that great? I mean, isn't that an awesome way to live? And I want us to think about that financially. Do we live our life financially deliberate? Do we actually take control of our finances and make deliberate choices and get deliberate results? I think about myself, and a lot of times I think, well, I don't know that I do live a deliberately financial life, or at least I didn't. right? I went to school, I got my degree, I graduated, I got a job at a bank, I worked real hard, I got promoted a few times, got some raises, and that's just kind of how I thought life worked. You know, and oftentimes I hear people think, or they'll say things like, oh man, I wish I could make $1 million, right? Well, when was the last time they tried? When was the last time that I tried? That's an interesting question, isn't it? That question almost insinuates that those people who do make $1 million, it just comes to them. I mean, there are people, yeah, who, you know, have great circumstances in their lives and it's just easy for them. But I am willing to bet, and I believe, that most people who make good money have to work real hard for that money. And it's a trade-off. Some of us just feel like, you know what, I don't want to do that kind of work. I don't want to work that much time. Other things are more valuable to me, and that's totally fine. But that's what I think living a financially deliberate life is. It's us making the decisions about our own income and our own expenses and how we want to allocate that money. Now, I say this, and I know a good number of you out there are a little frustrated or maybe a little depressed, and you're thinking things like, I can't even make enough money to pay my bills, and here you are talking about making $1 million. Or, I'm never going to be able to pay off my debt. It's just not realistic. Or, I'll never make enough money to really buy the things that I want. And totally legitimate concerns and questions. I've thought all of those things myself. Can't say they're dumb or stupid. I've had those exact same thoughts. But if money is really mental, let's see if we can ask some questions and keep this in perspective. So let's take those some questions, but I want you to kind of remove yourself from that situation. If you're thinking any one of those things in your life, I want you to just kind of set that aside, free yourself for a minute, just pretend like you have no debt, you have enough income to pay your expenses, you're not hugely wealthy, you're just living a very normal life. You're having enough income to pay your expenses and put a little bit of money into savings, okay? That's our situation. Now, imagine that you have a 10-year-old child, okay? And they are just starting to learn about money, okay? And maybe you're giving them an allowance, and at the same time, you've kind of set up a little bit of I don't want to call it a budget there, but some sort of payment plan. You're saying, okay, so much money you need to put into savings, and maybe you're trying to teach them, about charitable goods, or so much you need to put into charity there, okay? So let's go back now and let's pretend like our 10-year-old child is asking those questions, and I'm going to repeat those questions to you, and I want you to envision the child asking this to you as a parent. Well, I can't even make enough money to save and put some in charity and then buy anything that I want to buy. Or I'm never going to be able to make enough money to save for my bike. Or I'm never going to be able to save enough money to do the things that my friends want to do. Or, this wasn't one of the exact same questions, but it's a similar one, all of my other friends make more money, why can't I? Now, when we ask those questions, or at least when I do, and I picture it from a little child asking me that, I have a few thoughts. One of them is I just know that those statements aren't true, right? One, just because the dollar amount is so little, I sort of looking at that with some loving compassion. Like, no, you are going to have enough money to buy that bike. I know you will, because I got there. I overcame that. I saved my money. I had enough money to do that, It just adds a level of perspective that we have because we're older and we understand that those things can be overcome. The next thing we tend to do is we go right into the solution mode, which we typically do with kids. If they're like, well, I'm never going to have enough money to buy my bike. We start thinking, well, okay, let's think. I'm giving you an allowance, but maybe you could go mow the neighbor's lawn, or you could wash grandma's car. We start coming up with solutions here of other ways that they can save that money because we can see the end result is completely obtainable, okay? We come up with solutions. Do we do that for ourselves? Not always. It's that mental aspect. I think sometimes we just kind of wallow in those negative and self-defeating thoughts that we're never going to have enough and it's never going to work. Probably because it's been that way for several years, but that doesn't mean that we can't change it going forward. That doesn't mean that we can't come up with solutions. In fact, when we make those statements, I'm never going to make enough money to pay my monthly expenses, or I'm never going to be able to pay off my debt. When we really think about that, we've already given up. We've already made the statement that it's not going to happen, so why even try? And if that's our attitude, if we go back to thinking about how we view it from a little child's perspective, we know that we're never going to get there. So that's kind of the mental aspect of the money funds. Now, I hope that will resonate with you, and I hope that will make some sense. But at the same time, I hope it doesn't depress you even more, thinking, well, I am never going to pay off my debt, and now I'm thinking I'm never going to pay off my debt, so I've already given up, so I'm really never going to be able to do it, okay? That's not the intent of this podcast or this video, okay? We can think other things, and we can come up with solutions. That's more what I want you to focus on, is those solutions that you came up for that 10-year-old child. Maybe how can you come up with solutions for yourself? And that's part of what I do as a financial coach. I've got this really awesome spreadsheet. It's all automatic. You dump in your expenses from the last 30 days. You put in some categories that you've assigned, that you've created, and it dumps out your family's budget for you. Super crazy easy, okay? Super awesome. You're gonna love it. In fact, I'll leave a link to that if you're watching this on YouTube in the descriptions below. If you're listening to it on my podcast, go to my website and it'll be under the first podcast. My website is financiallyabundantlife.com. And while I'm talking about this, I would love it if you guys would subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're watching it on there, or write a review on the iTunes podcast. Anyways, let's go back to this. So the mental aspect, we don't want to give up ahead of time. We can create a budget. We can use our budget to allocate our income and to pay off those expenses, and then have enough money for what we want to do. I can help you with all of that if that's what you need. If not, go download the budget, make it work for you, and I promise you it's going to work. I want to leave you with one last quote from Thoreau here. This is also from his book Walden, or Life in the Woods. If you guys haven't read it, or if you don't know Thoreau, I kind of feel like most everyone knows Thoreau, Henry David Thoreau, one of the transcendentalists, but he's great. Go read his stuff. I love it. But anyways, here's another one of his quotes. It says, this is Henry David Thoreau. "I learned this, at least by my experiment, that if one advances confidently in the direction of their dreams and endeavor to live the life which they have imagined, they will meet with a success unexpected in common hours." I really believe that. I believe that if we march forward confidently in our financial life, that we can experience, and that we will experience, financial success. There's no great energy out there that doesn't want us to be successful. There's nobody out there pushing us down, nobody but ourselves and our own thoughts and our own actions. But if we think deliberately and we march forward deliberately, then we will experience that financial success. And we will be free to raise our family in a way that we deem prudent, without having the financial stress hanging over us. All right, that's what I have for you today. I hope that you found it useful. Again, go to the YouTube channel, and if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to my channel. If you're listening to this on the podcast, I would love for you to write a review or make sure that you've subscribed to it. Until then, I will talk to you next week. Thanks, everyone.